this is the same government, and it's extremely ironic to see that this is the same government which has not held an election in Jammu and Kashmir for 6 years. So you cannot have it both ways.
The thing I've been reflecting on is the security situation in Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, the fact that they said that they're doing Maharashtra election later, they did the elections in three phases. What does that say about our comfort as a nation on security in Jammu and Kashmir?
But now I think unemployment is really becoming sort of front and center the topic for a lot of these state elections.
In the mid late 80s, Kashmir even saw as high voting turnout as 75%. This is remarkable, extraordinary. And now for Kashmir to show 65, 55, 45% is not a huge increase in itself.
Hi, and welcome to episode 29 of the India Dialogue. We're so grateful you're here. My name is Ruchir. As always, I'm joined by my co hosts, Mitali and Manu. Mitali is an author of a book called Crypto Crimes. She's known for her time at CNBC. She's the acting director at the Reuters Institute. Manu is an advocate, a lawyer with his own law practice, and is a spokesperson for DMK. I'm Ruchir. I'm the CEO at Distributed Energy and chair at the School of Policy and Governance. Every week, we try to dive deep on issues in India, on current affairs, and try and explore them from different perspectives. This week, we're focused on one, which is state elections. Mitali, why don't you tell us more?
Yeah, always newsy in India, so there's always something to talk about. This time it's state elections, Jammu and Kashmir that is going to elections. It's a three-phase process there, and Haryana as well. It's interesting that we're having this conversation in the background of the one nation, one election debate coming to the fore again, and a lot of critics have pointed out that for a country or a central government that hasn't been able to fix on dates for Maharashtra, Jammu, Kashmir, and Haryana simultaneously. It's a bit ironic to be having that conversation about one nation, one election, but I'm sure there's sort of many different points of view about it. But let's break up these two states because I think they're quite fascinating in terms of what's happening there, what the context of these states says, and what could be sort of critical issues for both of them. Manu, you want to kick things off, and which state would you like to start with? Because I think both are equally sort of fascinating stories in themselves.
I think the more fascinating amongst them, Kashmir is what I would like to begin with myself. Also, because it's an interesting election being held after Article 370 was abrogated, after Jammu and Kashmir was no longer, a state, and it has been split into three, right? Jammu, then Ladakh, and Kashmir, and again, it's very interesting because you have the government narrative over the last 2 weeks around one nation, one election, saying we have the capability of holding an entire election to the parliament, which is the Lok Sabha, as well as every state legislative assembly. So 30 state legislative assemblies in one go. Okay, so in one go, it could be a few phases, but in one go. And soon after that, within 100 days after that, we will hold all the panchayat and the corporation, so the urban and rural local body elections across India. Now, this is the same government, I must point out, and it's extremely ironic to see that this is the same government which has not held an election in Jammu and Kashmir, even after abrogating Article 370 and splitting it into three ways for 6 years. So you cannot have it both ways, right? Then why have you not held the elections in Jammu and Kashmir? Nevertheless, finally, elections have been held. We've had them in two phases. First one on September 18th, and the second one on September 25th. Now, always whenever we speak about Jammu and Kashmir, people are quick to point out, especially those who are supporters of the present union government, that no, see what's happened. The election turnout has increased, right? And the problem is that it's very wrong statistically, and any data person will tell you this, to just compare, what happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago with now, from the overall average data, voter turnout data. The thing is to understand with each constituency how voter data, turnout data has changed or increased. Now, if you look at that, my understanding is that in the mid late 80s, Kashmir even saw as high voting turnout as 75%, which is remarkable, extraordinary. And now, for Kashmir to show 65, 55, 45% is not a huge increase in itself. And secondly, there are still places in Kashmir, and these are the areas of Kishtawar, Doda, and Ramban, where it is still extremely low. It is, in 15%, 9%, and so on. So, very hard to really tell whether voter turnout is increased or not. The second part of this question is always whether an increased voter turnout means whether the voting population has more confidence in the election process, in the democratic process, or does it mean that there is a greater anger, there's a greater anti-incumbency. Typically, one theory that has always been explained in these circumstances is more the anger against the government, more people will turn out in larger numbers, in greater proportions to vote. So, again, it's very hard to figure out why these are, and we do not have exact data and information. But some of the largest rallies have been seen, for, I think, Mr. Engineer, who we've discussed also in the past, who in the parliamentary elections had a fantastic sort of voter following and turnout in his rallies and in the election itself. So it's very difficult to sort of quite understand which way trends are leaning. But I think Jammu and Kashmir is what I will look at, and maybe it is something that I would say we must come back at some point in this podcast in a few weeks' time to understand what has happened and why it has happened. The other very fascinating thing, and I won't go to Haryana, but I want to talk about Maharashtra, right? Because Maharashtra should have also been notified to go to elections, but for some strange reason, we do not know why Maharashtra elections are not being notified yet. Now, as you know, Maharashtra is an interesting state because last time when the elections were held, the government was formed from well, the pre-poll alliance was Bharatiya Janata Party and Shiv Sena. But after that, the Shiv Sena moved towards in National Congress Party and the Congress, and they formed the Grand Alliance there, which then initially governed for 2.5 years. After which we had a complete turnaround, and when one major part of Shiv Sena under Eknath Shinde went back to BJP, went with the BJP, and subsequently one part of Nationalist Congress Party led by Ajit Pawar went and joined the BJP led or BJP Shiv Sena Eknath Shinde alliance as well. So now, after all of these sorts of confusing political permutations, we have an election where really the question is who is the real Shiv Sena, who is the real NCP, and really which alliance still commands respect and confidence of the people. So I think that is something people are waiting for, because Maharashtra is also financially and politically very influential in our country, and therefore to see, but we do not know. So again, going back to the one nation, one election formula, which is now currently being put forth by the government, we do not know why they're not even able to hold very many state elections at one time, let alone hold all the different states in one go. So I will stop there.
I mean, I was just going to say the election commission officially said that they are not doing Maharashtra state elections because they want more security personnel in Jammu and Kashmir. Um, like maybe because they haven't done J&K in a while, and that's what it needs. But yeah, it sounded strange to me. I wonder, the campaigning in Maharashtra seems like in full swing. I haven't heard about as many investments going into Maharashtra as I have in the last 2 weeks. So they're clearly ramping up for it, but it was very strange to me that they haven't announced it yet. Mitali, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to ask you which one you're tracking, Ruchir. Any of these three that really stand out?
I think obviously Haryana is interesting too, and maybe because we haven't discussed it, I should go there. I mean, in some ways, BJP or the coalition there has been in power for almost 10 years, and I think at least the read on the ground is that we're going to see a similar amount of fatigue, maybe worse than we saw in the union election, where they don't have the ground per se. The Congress has obviously gained momentum, but so up because of how close they are, both in Punjab and Delhi, are working hard as well. So it'll be interesting to see what alliances actually um, take control. But what it looks like is that the current party, the BJP JJP coalition, is definitely on its way out. Any thoughts on that?
So I think two or three issues. Again, Haryana is a smaller state, but again, by virtue of being so close to Delhi, it does get very well reported. And I think from what little we have seen, some of the farmers-related issues, including the protests around the minimum support prices, they've played a huge role in setting some undercurrents over the last year or two. I've heard that the unemployment issue has made it to the mainstream sort of political narrative in Haryana quite a bit, and that is linked to the Agnipath scheme also, and there was a lot of concerns around that. Another sort of an issue which I would say, I don't know how many people really will go vote on this, but the allegations of sexual harassment leveled by the wrestlers, the women wrestlers, against the then president of the Wrestling Federation. I think they, though it may not really add votes or convert votes, I think it forms always part of this sort of messaging and campaign narrative. And it's always something that will come and make people think twice about or create a narrative that this is a government or this is a political dispensation which stood behind or which supported a person even after so many Indian sports persons came out and made allegations and that. So that's there. And lastly, I agree with what Ruchir said. The anti-incumbency is a huge factor. I think Haryana has been plagued by it. Also having like a double engine anti-incumbency, right? The union government and the Haryana government. Initially that would be seen as something as a vote for hope that the union and the state would work in tandem. But if all of these issues start piling up, then it would be seen as a complete failure, and they may even throw their lot back. And what really helps in these situations, like you've seen in Karnataka, where it's a by and large, according to me, it's still a BJP Congress fight, right? Even though Aam Aadmi Party and other smaller parties are there, it really helps when you have a very strong, established opposition face. So in Karnataka, you had Siddharamaya and DK Shivkumar. And here you, of course, have Bhupinder Huda. So you have somebody who's tried and tested, somebody who's a proven leader and an established, a former chief minister, right? So I think it really then helps anti-incumbency be pushed or driven into that into the hands of the opposition, as opposed to it being sort of the anti-incumbency like being dissipated over two or three different combinations or different parties, which often helps the ruling party. So those are my thoughts on Haryana. If anybody wants to add or subtract.
I want to explore, because it's been a little bit of time since we last met, the Kejriwal resignation. What do you make of it? Obviously, we believe is a bit of a contender in Haryana, but do you think the Kejriwal resignation will pay off at all?
Before I answer Kejriwal, I actually, just want to map a little bit about both Haryana, or maybe Haryana, and then we can move to J&K after Ruchir. And I want to start with not an anecdote, but an actual fact of events, which is that a couple of weeks back, I don't know if you saw this news item where more than 46,000 graduates and postgraduates in Haryana actually applied for jobs of contractual sweepers with a state owned corporation. And, when that story was sort of scratched a bit further and members of the corporation were questioned, they said that people who were applying were fully aware of what the job entailed and, what the job was being detailed as. I think it sort of really underlines what has become now an acute situation in Haryana, more than any other state, Jammu and Kashmir as well, but Haryana the most, which is that a vast majority of the unemployed there are youth, and a vast majority within that are actually educated young people. By 2022, CMI had, sort of predicted that Haryana was going to do worst in terms of employment numbers, and they pitted it at somewhere around 30%, I think. By the time they closed that year, Haryana's unemployment figures were at 37%. It's a stunning figure. It's a very small state, but it's always been quite an industrialized state. It's had a lot of automobile companies. It, has Gurgaon, which, as we know, has been a big tech hub. And it's really striking how unemployment has really driven a lot of sort of progress for that state down to the ground. The other one I think that is important is the one that, or two that Manu pointed to, is the Agniveer scheme. We often don't realize how much parts of India sort of contribute to the central defense forces. So Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan contribute close to about 25 to 27% of the armed forces. And there was huge offtake up until before the pandemic, when the army was still doing these recruitment drives. And Agniveer has really sort of struck a very, very raw nerve for young people there who saw the defense services as a really honorable career. Um, and I think that's been sort of blow number two. And certainly, blow number three is this really ugly situation between the wrestling community and both the state government and the central government. There's two things there. I mean, Haryana is a deeply conservative society. It takes a lot for families to send their young daughters for training, but they see the value of it because they've seen female wrestlers in Haryana achieve the success that they have. So the fact that there is sort of a sexual harassment shroud around it, first of all, makes this really complex. And I think, just just sort of adding on to that event, what has come to the fore is how badly a lot of these wrestlers are paid, what their possibilities are in terms of government employment, which is generally, something that is aspired towards for many sports persons in India, to also have a government job to sort of buttress that and to provide financial stability. And I think Haryana is going to be a really interesting wake up call, if it goes against the state government and, of course, by extension, the union government, in terms of what a big, and frankly, at this point, unpackable challenge unemployment has become. I think, there's just no way we can keep sweeping this under the carpet. It's happened for a long time. There's been a lot of, but look at that, and then look at this. But now I think unemployment is really becoming sort of front and center the topic for a lot of these state elections. It's really coming up, and it is an emotive issue because you are seeing the opposition pick it up. You are seeing offtake on the ground when you speak to people, in terms of anger around that. And I think that really is going to be a big indicator of what the mood is around employment and jobs. On Delhi, we can speak about that, and then we can go back to J&K. It's being labeled a political masterstroke. It's also, frankly, on the outside, a little bit cringy to see the process in which AAP is going about this. It's almost like, and they have, I know, often been sort of labeled as a BJP light or a BJP 2.0. And some of that you are seeing. I mean, Atishi is an extremely accomplished academic. She's a very bright person. She's obviously, led from the front in terms of the work that they've done around education. She's been, on the street protesting on behalf of AAP. So it's, you do wonder what it is, what path it is that the party wants to take in the future when you have these images of Atishi being sworn in as a stand-in chief minister, if you will, with an empty chair on her side, or videos of her and other women, reciting religious prayers. I mean, we are all free, of course, to practice any religion that we want. You just wonder what the model of ARP was when it started and where it is, in their journey that they want to take this. Whether or not they are a huge player in Haryana, I'm frankly not sure, Ruchir, because I don't know on ground, if you were to talk to people from Punjab, what their experience has been so far. I would reckon it's not been great. ARP emerged as the option between frustration with the BJP and a sense of, like, they were jaded with the Congress, and ARP seemed to be a refreshing option. I'm not sure where that relationship between the people of Punjab and their state government has gone. Manu, what do you feel?
So interesting to hear that, Mithali. And I know that the ARP political machinery, the ARP campaign machinery, is actually now fairly well oiled, and it's seen many state elections and union elections, right? Now, firstly, the months that Kejriwal was in jail, they did not replace him as chief minister, right? So, firstly, they wanted to show they all completely back him and that he is, the leader above everybody else, unquestioned. Next, when he came out at the time of being granted bail, the Supreme Court had sort of left some questions for him to answer, whether, as a person facing these corruption allegations in these cases, should he be someone who also perused files and documents and visited the chief minister's office and so on. Now, let me say why this is strange, right? In 2014, after a 17-year uh, criminal legal process, the sitting chief minister of Tamil Nadu, Jayalalitha, was convicted in a corruption case. Now, in September 2014, she was convicted in a corruption case. Now, after which, she came out after a month in October. And when you file an appeal in a criminal case after conviction, they suspend your sentence. It is to say that, okay, we will just keep this in abeyance for a while till your appeal is over. At that point, no court, High Court or Supreme Court, asked whether she could become chief minister again, right? And this is a case which the police, the investigating authority which was prosecuting Jayalalitha, was the Tamil Nadu's Directorate of Vigilance and Anti-Corruption. So it was police who actually essentially worked under her. All right. Now, why I'm saying that is, I don't, I think what was done for Jayalalitha is absolutely right. I think when you have filed an appeal and when you come out, you still should have an opportunity to work in a position which you were elected for. I don't see any great harm in that. The problem here is with Kejriwal, they put in so many conditions at a time when he's not even, begun his trial, right? So the entire principle or doctrine of innocent till proven guilty seems to have gone for a toss. Now we come to what has happened after he's come out, right? So obviously they got in a little bit of a planning mode, and they were very quick to realize, according to me, that the Delhi elections are anyway scheduled for February 2025. So it's hardly another 3 months 3 months of real governance, right? And this is Delhi governance, where anyway half the powers are taken away by the union. So it's not even like another state. So really, he's probably realized there's 3 months and he's not going to get much done. And anyway, there will be this campaign if he is the chief minister that you have a corrupt person for the chief minister, a person who's been jailed and so on and so forth. So I think they've done this very smart thing of, switching out for now. And Kejriwal has made it clear that if re-elected and once re-elected, he will come back as chief minister. So really, he's shifted the moral narrative from this court case and the Supreme Court bail conditions to public domain and said, if people want and if they vote me, having already complete knowledge of this case against me, which involves corruption allegations, then I will have the moral upper hand. I will have the moral right to come back as chief minister. So I think it's now moved from the realm of the legal or political to one of morals, right? Who should sit here, who should not sit here, and that is partly, I think, what AAP is also playing around with the whole empty chair, the paying obeisance to the leader who's no longer there but is sort of guiding them in spirit and so on and so forth. So I think it's a very interesting campaign that will unravel over the next 3 to 6 months, and we will see a lot of these moral questions. Of course, Kejriwal will and must play this card of victim and say that I've been victimized, there is political vendetta, I was hounded, I was thrown in jail. And on the other hand, BJP will present a moral question to say whether do you want such a person to be your chief minister again? What if he goes back in jail? What will happen to you then? Unfortunately, this will shift the discussion and narrative away from actually what AAP has done, right? And AAP is what they wanted to do, and I think what they've achieved, I don't know to what extent, but they have done is to make sure that education and health is always prioritized, right? Those were the two big um, policy narratives that they tried to set, the policy agendas that they were big on. But unfortunately, now the game that BJP has made them play is not whether we've done model schools and mohalla clinics well, but who should be the chief minister? Do you want a person with a corruption allegation as your leader of your state and so on? So I think that shift has happened, and AAP probably thinks we can still beat them at it by playing their own game, which is what I think AAP also does by all these, like you said. I think people, religion is a matter of, it's a private matter. People should be able to, be as religious as they want or not. But I think AAP always has this belief that we can beat BJP even in the religious game better than them. I remember one interview, and I'll wrap up with that. I think it was either before the last Delhi elections or thereabouts, when Kejriwal was being interviewed. This person in the middle of this huge town hall meeting, the anchor of a very popular English media channel, said something about the Hanuman Chalisa, and do you know it? And Kejriwal, without missing a beat, took the mic from him and recited it, verse for verse, verbatim, right? Now, again, I think, like I said, the answer should have been that no. See, that is none of your concern. Whether I know the Hanuman Chalisa, whether I know this Bhagavad Gita, whether I know, my Hindu verses, or whether I know my Quran, or whether I know my Bible, that's none of your business, right? That's a matter for my own self and my connection with God or not. But what AAP and I think what Mr. Kejriwal believes is no, I'm actually more Hindu than you. I'm actually better at this than you, and I can prove that to you. Like I said, I think that's the game that AAP likes to play. So they don't want to. I don't think they want to themselves shift it back to mohallas and model schools. I think which they've done a good job. Not that they shouldn't be proud of it, but I think they feel fine if this is the game. If this is the weapon BJP wants to hit us with, we will use the same weapon and we will do it better.
I suppose we've gone to the Delhi elections now, right? But one thing they've also done strongly from the very, very beginning is play the victim card. And that's quite amazing because in Delhi now they've been in power for over like 10 years or a little over. So consistently, at least Arvind Kejriwal has been good at blaming everybody else and not taking responsibility. Um, Mitali, any thoughts on the Delhi election?
Yeah, no, no. I mean, we'll know when we'll know. But you're right. They do play the victim card very, very, very astutely. I think part of the Punjab election conversation was about, here's how we'll solve the pollution problem that Delhi faces, because now, we'll be in power in two states. There'll be greater dialogue, and here we are, with nothing really solved. In fact, I thought it was quite gratingly ironic that when Arvind Kejriwal was granted bail, there were videos everywhere of party members celebrating by bursting firecrackers. And in my head, I was just thinking, really, is that the tone that you want to set for a state that has been besieged with, air pollution problems? On J&K, Ruchir, I just wanted to make two quick points of sort of things that I'm looking at that have interested me. One is that, and Manu documented so much of what's happening over there in terms of turnout, in terms of what issues will likely be for people going in to vote. One is a wholly different type of data, and I know that we touched upon this a little bit when Rishi was on our podcast. I was just looking at the numbers. Uh, there's been, as documented by various organizations, an exponential rise in substance abuse in the Kashmir Valley specifically. In fact, I think in 23 there was a parliamentary standing committee, and the figures at that point that they reported was 1.35 million drug users in the valley. That's one. And the other, that there has also been steady documentation of the increase in death by suicide. Now, if you were to sort of pull this line back a little bit more, it has always been higher than the national average. But since the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, they found that there was a spike in cases. To I think 450 or close to that figure. By 2021, that number had risen even more, close to 600. I think it's really sort of, in a very, very grim way, echoing what the state of mental health is for people in that state, what it is that they have been going through for decades now and generations actually. So that's something that really struck me as people go out to vote. What is it that they feel at this point? And the other one actually is Jammu, which I think isn't getting that much attention in terms of what happens there, because it has traditionally been considered a BJP stronghold. But if you just go back over the last 18 months or so, you will see a recurrence of public protests happening in Jammu. There was an excise duty change basically around that impacted liquor vendors, which opened up online bids and to the minds of smaller businessmen in Jammu who are liquor vendors themselves. It completely stamped out possibilities for the smaller players and really brought in the big players. Then there was the toll plaza, that was the Saror toll plaza. Again, Jammu has a really large transport industry, and they have felt that this has impacted them in a very disadvantageous manner. So it's quite interesting what's happening in this sort of subcutaneous layer of Jammu and Kashmir as we see it, where what has traditionally been a stronghold for BJP has now had continuous rumblings of, displeasure. People are unhappy. People feel unrepresented. So I'd be really keen on seeing, how things turn out in terms of how people choose to vote in outside of the valley and in Jammu. So that's just the two things I'm spotting in J&K. What about you, Ruchir?
Now, I was hoping Manu would take it. I mean, I think and I suppose this is not related to the issues, but more in terms of logistics. It is quite interesting given that we have had not incredible peace, but I suppose relative peace for quite a while now, that we still do the elections in three phases. The thing I've been reflecting on is the security situation in Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, the fact that they said that they're doing Maharashtra election later, they did the elections in three phases. What does that say about our comfort as a nation on security in Jammu and Kashmir? And I think, like, it doesn't seem to me that as a country we feel on top of um, um, like the infrastructure and the security there. So that is something I was thinking about, because of the small nature of the state, as in terms of population. The other thing, obviously, is the UT of Leh and Ladakh, and like, do we have visibility on whether it sounds like they will continue to be a union territory, no longer will be part of the state. Is that right? And Manu, from the last episode, I did have this question. What does it mean to be a state again? Like, do we have to wait for the election for the parliament to form for the state to be formed?
So, I mean, this is, astounding that we are even having this conversation because even we do not know, right? And this is the level of lack of awareness creation that the decisions and the actions of this government, of the union government, in bifurcating and converting a state into union territory has resulted in. Now, states have more autonomy, states have more independence in policy and decision making in accordance with the constitution. So if you remember, Ruchir, seventh schedule to the Constitution of India, it divides the powers, the legislative powers, into three categories: one, union list, state list, and concurrent list. Okay, which, so really it is the legislative power that is, in a sense, split. Hmm? And those powers are, of course, not existent in union territories because the union government, through the Home Ministry, takes these decisions and the Parliament sort of gives a seal of approval. So that's the main decision. And of course, when that will happen, how that will happen, and this is it's not a light switch. You can't just turn it off and on and say now you're a state. Go ahead and start making policies for yourselves. And it's a bit strange. Just your quickly on your security point, Richard, because you've mentioned this a couple of times. Um, Let me take the example of a state which we don't associate with too many security concerns, not that I know of anyway, Madhya Pradesh, right? It has 28 Lok Sabha seats only, okay? In comparison, Tamil Nadu has 39, okay? Tamil Nadu had election in one phase in 2024. Madhya Pradesh had elections in four phases for 28 seats. There are no security concerns that you or I heard of, nor did the election commission or the union government say that there is very secretive information about security about Madhya Pradesh, right? So I think it's fair for us at this point, with all this information that we have at hand, to tell that the number of faces is no indication of the security concern at all. Okay. West Bengal for 42 seats had seven faces election, right? Ridiculous, like 555 seats. By and large, the consensus in our thinking is that it's all being done to suit the party in power. Okay. They want certain elections at certain stages and certain states in certain phases and certain states in many phases. That's it. There is no, there is no empirically backed or evidence based, uh, allocation of faces or distribution of faces.
I suppose making security a reason is such a way to not have the masses, the janta, question you, right? Because it's like
Stifle,
when
yeah,
you
absolutely.
you use the word
There
security and
were
everyone will go quiet. I went quiet. I mean, that's yeah.
I mean,
absolutely.
it's also, I just going to very quickly, it's really ironic, Ruchir, because Kashmir Valley remains one of the most militarized regions in the world. I mean, at this point, certainly in India, we have the maximum number of boots on the ground. So, you know, how much security is enough security? You do ask that as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, I think, as you rightly said, I think, thank you for bringing Delhi in because I think Delhi, though the elections are not notified, I think campaign began the day Kejriwal came out. At least AAP's campaign began that day. I think Haryana, we've already discussed the various issues. It'll be very interesting. And I think by and large, it looks like the anti incumbency will work in favor of Congress a great deal. And of course, Congress has made the right sort of moves by bringing in the wrestlers into their fold because they'll be fantastic sort of campaign assets for them. And again, Kashmir we've discussed a great deal, and Maharashtra I'm sure we'll discuss again. So I think let's keep the elections for next time, and maybe we can move to have you heards.
Yeah, Abdul Sunak. Yeah, I'll go first. I've been reading a book by William Dalrymple on the Golden Road, and one of the things I didn't realize is the Silk Road as a term was not introduced until I think like late 1800s, like 1870s or 1880s, and it was actually introduced by a German who was talking about trade between Berlin and Beijing. Turns out that Silk Road wasn't really a thing, and it's mostly been propaganda by the Chinese as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. It's been like this whole vision around investing in infrastructure outside of China. And as part of that journey, they've been popularizing the concept of the Silk Road. At least in the book, it talks heavily about the trade between China and Europe, primarily going through India, where so much of the Chinese metals or the raw materials were being processed in India and then being taken to now Egypt, but back then the Roman Empire via the ocean. So I didn't know this. I always believed that the Silk Road was real, but turns out that it wasn't really a meaningful route. That was my heavy hit.
Manu, you go next.
Okay, so mine is have you heard and have you seen a little bit? Because I'm going to today tell you guys a little bit about why I've been sleeping better the last 6 to 7 weeks or so. I don't want this to sound like a product placement or an advertisement for one of those, but I have to show you guys. So I've been wearing one of the sleep trackers, and there are many, right? There's the rings now, and there's the different kinds of ones. And the ones that have come out in the last year, especially the rings and the band ones, they are way better than the ones that we had about 2, 3 years ago, right? Because they now measure heart rate, they measure blood oxygen saturation, they measure skin temperature, and they based on that they do a bunch of analytics to let you know how much you're sleeping and how well you're sleeping. So they divide your sleep into so many different sleeping blocks and tell you when you are in deep sleep, when you're in sort of light sleep and REM sleep and all of that. Now, a lot of people would, I think immediately they've asked me, but isn't this just like too much information? Why don't you just sleep when you're tired? Why don't you wake up when you are less tired and feeling awake? And that's perfectly normal. And I'm with you, and I hear all of you on that. But I think sometimes you sleep a more hours than you normally do, and you still wake up tired, right? Sometimes you sleep less and you still wake up energetic, and again you have no idea, right? So I think there's only so far your gut and intuition can take you, and I think that's where really this data about deep sleep, this data about REM sleep, this data about stress, and of course this one measures stress and recovery also, and it tells you, how much your body can sort of handle, how much you can exert yourself on that particular day, and so on. So it's given me some semblance of sleep work balance, and for that I am grateful, and I think this is the way of the future if you haven't already invested in one.
Very cool. And Manu, I just finished watching a murder mystery series in which one of the suspects, his final sort of alibi is his watch, which showed that he was sleeping in, over the particular hours that the murder was committed. So you never know, Manu, when you need it, right?
In a criminal
Very
trial,
cool.
maybe. Let's see.
Very cool. I don't have it's not a fully formed have you heard. It's more like I'm thinking about. This week, I'm saying goodbye to a really sort of a really treasured colleague, and it got me thinking, especially in the Indian language. There's no actual word to say goodbye. Like in Bengali, you say esho, which means come back. I think in Tamil, you say poitavare and poitava, which means go and return, or I will go and I will return. And there's so many languages across the world where hello and goodbye actually mean the same thing. Like ciao could be used either ways. So I wonder if it's worth exploring how many languages in the world actually do that. But I think it's so special to be able to say in your language that it never is goodbye. It's sort of just a pause saying you're going but you're coming back and I'm expecting you, which is nice.
There you have it. Thank you, Mitali. Thank you, Manu. Thank you all for
There,
listening in. We're so
there is no
grateful.
goodbye for this podcast.
No,
We will see you
come
again.
back. Like a Terminator.
Come back and listen to us next week. We are not saying goodbye. This is not a goodbye, Ruchir.
Yeah.
No.
Fair enough. Sounds good. We abruptly ended and then start the next episode. Find us on Twitter or X. We're at TID underscore podcast, the India Dialogue underscore podcast. YouTube, India Dialogue podcast channel, Apple or Spotify. Mitali is Mitali Live on X. Manu is Manu Live 1983. I'm Ruchir underscore P. Until next time.